dude, the story keeps shifting. Every time you think you got it, it changes. That's not an accident. And the fact that they had such poor security guarding him, like they did such a terrible job.
Everyone thought this was just another shocking headline, but behind the cameras, something far darker was unfolding, and Joe Rogan has just blown the lid off it, exposing chilling new details about the Charlie Kirk shooting, from mysterious decoys to old war rifles to bizarre child crime arrests, and a suspicious line of sight that nobody in security seemed to check, raising terrifying questions about hidden motives, shadowy connections, and a plot so strange it feels like a movie script, yet it's real and happening right now, as he warns the public that what we're being told may be only the tip of an iceberg, far more dangerous and far more organized than anyone wants to admit. From the very first detail, the story already feels off. Joe Rogan insists this wasn't some random tragedy. It was carefully staged, like a chilling signal sent in plain sight. And the strangest part is how many red flags were ignored. Imagine a clear line of sight between the shooter and the stage. Yet, no security check, no drones, no counter surveillance, nothing. And while the headlines painted a simple narrative, Joe pointed out one bizarre distraction that almost nobody is talking about: a man in the crowd who suddenly yelled bizarre things, pulled down his pants, and claimed responsibility, only to be arrested moments later on. Completely different charges, child exploitation charges, that instantly silenced him for public questioning. The coincidence is too insane to ignore. How could the same man appear at multiple chaotic events and always end up in the middle of the storm? This is what Joe called professional insanity, a deliberate plant designed to confuse investigators and distract the public from the truth, raising the terrifying possibility that what happened that day was not an isolated act, but part of something coordinated. Joe then shifted to the weapon itself and the deeper mystery surrounding it. Because according to the official story, the shooter used a World War I era rifle passed down from his grandfather. Yet every photo and frame Joe examined looked nothing like an antique, instead resembling a modern bolt-action gun with a sleek composite stock and a high-end scope that could deliver pinpoint accuracy at 200 yards, which immediately raised the question: why would someone attempting a high-profile assassination choose an outdated rifle unless it had been rebuilt by a master gunsmith or swapped entirely for something else? The narrative keeps changing. First, it's a family heirloom, then it's a sniper-level setup, then claims emerge that he disassembled the weapon, stuffed it into a backpack, climbed to a rooftop, and reassembled it under pressure, all without being noticed. It's a story Joe openly calls impossible because even elite shooters would need time and space to do that. The pieces just don't fit together, and every new detail makes the event look less like an impulsive act and more like a carefully scripted operation designed to confuse and mislead the public. As the story unfolded, Joe zeroed in on the most disturbing part: the idea that a young man with no military training, no sniper background, and no documented experience could suddenly pull off a precision shot at such a difficult angle, hitting his target cleanly from over 100 yards away. The narrative expects the public to believe that someone with zero tactical knowledge managed what trained marksmen spend years perfecting. And while the media brushed over this detail, Joe explained how even experienced shooters struggle with iron sights or scopes without proper calibration, making it nearly impossible for an amateur to land that kind of hit. The only way it would make sense, he argued, is if someone professional had been guiding him, or if the weapon had been expertly prepared in advance. Either way, it suggests the story is missing key players and key details, because nothing about it feels accidental or random, and that's exactly why he warns the public to look closer at the inconsistencies. But things only get stranger when you look at what happened after the shooting, because witnesses claim they saw a man leaping off the rooftop and disappearing into the chaos, and yet the official story insists that this same figure somehow carried the rifle in pieces inside a backpack, reassembled it perfectly on the roof, fired with deadly precision, and then escaped without being stopped. Joe calls this pure fantasy because disassembling and reassembling a rifle under pressure isn't just unrealistic, it's nearly impossible without expert training. And to make matters worse, Video surfaced showing the jump itself, sparking questions over whether the man caught on camera was even the actual shooter or just another decoy planted to muddy the waters. The contradictions keep stacking up, and the more people investigate, the more the entire event begins to feel staged, manipulated, and deliberately confusing, as though the truth was never meant to be uncovered. Joe pointed out that even the evidence left behind raises more questions than answers, because if the shooter truly had no training, how did he access the rooftop without being spotted by security? How did nobody notice the clear line of sight that should have been monitored? How could an amateur know the exact angles and distances while moving under stress, and yet somehow still execute the shot with flawless accuracy? Nothing about this matches the profile of a lone, unstable gunman. Instead, it feels orchestrated. Every overlooked security gap, every inconsistent report, every conveniently timed distraction adds up to something bigger. And Joe warns that when the puzzle pieces don't fit, you have to ask whether someone designed the puzzle itself to mislead the public, because the narrative being pushed makes less sense the deeper you look into it. The deeper investigators dig, the stranger the connections become, because suddenly the shooter's personal life is thrust into the spotlight, with people claiming to uncover bizarre online activity, strange friendships, and even hints of role-playing groups and fringe communities, yet none of it explains how an ordinary kid with no military background could transform overnight into a precision marksman. Joe argues that this is the classic tactic of flooding the narrative with noise, burying the truth under layers of irrelevant details and half-baked rumors, so the public loses track of what really matters. Meanwhile, one undeniable fact remains. A public figure was struck down in broad daylight, while security failed on every level, and the official story keeps twisting to cover the gaps, leaving behind a trail of confusion and doubt that only grows darker the closer you look. Joe didn't stop there. He warned that the fallout from this event is just as dangerous as the shooting itself, because the more people see the contradictions, the more they lose faith that the truth will ever come out, and that is exactly how division spreads. One side celebrates the tragedy, the other side grows angrier and more suspicious, and all the while, the media spins conflicting narratives that only deepen the chaos instead of encouraging debate or open discourse. This moment has turned into a cultural weapon, fueling hate, fear, and distrust. And Joe makes it clear that this isn't about whether you agreed with Charlie Kirk or not. It's about what happens when society stops respecting conversation and starts rewarding violence. Because once that line is crossed, the danger isn't just about one man, it's about the precedent it sets for every public figure, every campus speaker, and every person brave enough to share an unpopular opinion. And as the dust settled, Joe drew chilling parallels to history, reminding listeners of moments when single flashpoints spiraled into chaos, like the Rodney King riots or the near misses with leaders such as Kennedy and Trump. He stressed how fragile the line really is. 1 millimeter, one head turn, 1 second of chance can be the difference between survival and tragedy. And in Charlie Kirk's case, that line was crossed. And now the question is, what comes next? Because when a high-profile figure can be taken out in public with such ease, and the story around it is filled with contradictions, planted distractions, and unanswered questions, the danger is no longer about the past event, it's about the future, and whether this marks the tipping point toward even greater violence, division, and fear across the country. In the end, Joe Rogan's breakdown leaves us with one undeniable truth. None of this adds up. Not the weapon, not the rooftop escape, not the bizarre distractions, or the conveniently timed arrests. And the scariest part is that the more people dig, the less sense it makes, raising the haunting possibility that the public was never supposed to see the full picture, because the moment debate is replaced with bullets and questions are buried under propaganda, society crosses into a dangerous place. Joe's warning is clear. This isn't just about Charlie Kirk. It's about every public figure, every controversial voice, and every citizen who dares to speak openly in a climate where silencing someone can now be disguised as random chaos. The question left hanging is simple. If this really was a message, who was it meant for, and what comes next? Because the answers may be far darker than anyone is ready to face.